you are still awake.
Yeah, we know.
And I just want to start by saying, right here at the very beginning of our time together, that it is entirely okay.
Completely okay.
We are not going to ask you to relax tonight.
No, absolutely not.
We are not going to offer you some sterile, checklist of deep breathing exercises or tell you to count backward from 100.
Or give you a lecture about the dangers of blue light. I mean, we both know exactly how well all of that works at this particular hour.
Right, which is not at all. We know what it feels like when the room around you is entirely quiet, but the quiet itself is just so loud.
It's deafening, really.
It is. We know the texture of this specific darkness. It's when the ceiling above your bed has suddenly, almost magically, become a cinema screen.
Oh, that is the perfect way to describe it. A cinema screen.
And your mind has decided, with this absolute unyielding authority, that right now...
In the deepest, loneliest part of the night.
Exactly. That right now is the perfect, necessary time to review every single uncomfortable conversation you have had since, 2014.
It is a very specific, very unforgiving kind of cinema, isn't it?
Oh, the worst.
And it is always, it's always accompanied by a very specific kind of math.
The midnight math.
Right, the cruel arithmetic you might be doing right now. You glance at the accusatory glowing numbers on your phone.
Just glaring at you from the nightstand.
And your mind helpfully, mercilessly calculates the exact fraction of rest you have left to survive the coming day.
Right, it goes, okay, if I fall asleep right this second, I get 5 hours.
Exactly. So you close your eyes, the refrigerator hums in the kitchen.
You shift your weight a little.
You open your eyes again, and the phone says you now have 4.5 hours.
And 4.
It is a countdown that only tightens the chest. It's like a metronome of anxiety, measuring out the exact distance between the relief you desperately need.
And the morning that is coming, whether you are ready for it or not.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive is completely different. We've spent the past week immersed in this stack of deeply fascinating texts, mostly translations of ancient Daoist literature.
Specifically, the writings of Zhuangzi.
Right, alongside some historical analyses of early Chinese philosophy and even some modern psychological literature on the mechanics of nighttime rumination.
But we are not bringing you an instruction manual tonight.
No, definitely not. We are bringing you something closer to, well, a cup of tea that has been steeping in the dark for just a little too long.
So it's gone slightly cold.
Yeah, slightly cold. But somehow, sitting there in the quiet, that is exactly what you need.
It really is. We want to bring you a single ancient dream.
Just one dream.
Recorded thousands of years ago and designed to do one very specific thing.
Which is to make that solid, unyielding ceiling above you feel just a little less rigid.
That is the intention we are setting for this hour. By examining this profound philosophical exploration of Zhuangzi's famous butterfly dream, we're going to look closely at the architecture of your waking life.
And the goal isn't to solve your problems before dawn.
No, you can't do that. The goal is just to shift your relationship to them.
Right, so by the time we reach the end of this deep dive, that incredibly heavy, dense psychological armor you are wearing right now.
The armor that is literally pressing you into the mattress.
Exactly. It might feel just slightly like something you are allowed to safely set down.
But, lying here in the dark, before we can even begin to explore the lightness of the dream itself, we have to look very closely at the reality that is keeping you awake right now.
We have to acknowledge it. We have to acknowledge the immense, crushing weight of the room you are in.
Yeah, we can't just ignore it. And the texts we've been reading provide this brilliant, clarifying framework for understanding the difference between how our minds operate in the daylight versus how they operate in the dark.
I found this part so helpful because during the day, the human mind is essentially this restless, high-performance machine.
It demands friction, it demands input.
And you have an endless supply of things to feed that machine during the day. You give it the complex puzzle of your daily meetings.
You give it the small, immediate urgencies, the emails to answer,
errands to run,
traffic to navigate, and all those social obligations to fulfill. The mind is fully occupied with the physical friction of just moving through the day.
The daylight provides a structure that absorbs our cognitive energy. But then the night arrives.
And the daylight puzzle is systematically taken away.
The distractions of the external world just fall completely silent. The emails stop.
The traffic fades out.
And the mind, which is still humming with all that raw kinetic energy, suddenly has absolutely nowhere else to go.
So it turns inward.
Right. It turns inward and inward and inward again.
Just tunneling down until it finds the things you have been successfully, purposefully avoiding all day.
It finds the dark arithmetic.
Yeah. The psychological literature on rumination actually calls this the activation of the default mode network in the absence of task-oriented focus.
Which is a very clinical way of saying it.
Very clinical. But what it actually feels like is being trapped in a tiny room with your own worst fears.
It's the mortgage payment that is due in exactly 11 days.
It is the raw, unadorned number in your bank account.
And that terrifying, seemingly unbridgeable gap between what you have and what you genuinely believe you need to be secure.
Or maybe, maybe the math isn't financial at all tonight.
No, maybe for you, it is the devastating microanalysis of last Tuesday.
Oh, Tuesday.
You had a conversation, you said a thing, and you know the exact phrasing you used. And the other person's facial expression shifted.
Just a millimeter.
Just a slight tightening of the mouth. Or a brief, momentary severing of eye contact.
But you caught it.
You caught it. And now, at 3 a.m., you are replaying that slightly shifted facial expression over and over and over again.
Like a forensic analyst reviewing a piece of evidence.
Exactly. You're looking for a different meaning, hoping you misread the irritation or the disappointment.
But the cognitive loop convinces you, deep down, that you probably didn't.
And all of this, the mortgage, the emails, the microexpressions, that terrifying gap in the bank account, it all belongs to a concept that Daoist philosophy identifies as the solid life.
The solid life. This is the core of what is truly keeping you awake right now.
Can you break that down a bit more? What exactly do they mean by the solid life?
Well, the solid life is the existence that feels absolutely irrefutably mathematically real. It is the heavy, unyielding architecture of your waking identity.
Right.
It is built on the foundation of credit scores. It is constructed out of job titles, tax brackets, and that endless, relentless stream of recurring calendar notifications.
The ones that dictate precisely where your physical body must be at any given hour of the day.
Exactly. It's the 15-year plan you made when you were 26.
A plan based almost entirely on the version of life you thought you were supposed to want. Or perhaps the life you implicitly promised someone else you would achieve.
Yeah, the solid life is the narrative you have constructed about who you are, what you are worth, and, terrifyingly, what will happen if you fail to maintain the trajectory.
And what we really need to acknowledge here, what we want to say directly to you, lying there right now, staring into the dark, is how profoundly exhausting it is to maintain this identity.
The maintenance is continuous. It never stops.
The solid life requires a constant, unending performance. It requires you to be legible and acceptable to society at all times.
You have to keep all the plates spinning, perfectly balanced.
Without ever letting a single one drop.
Because the internal logic of the solid life tells you that if one plate drops, the entire structure collapses.
The fear isn't just that you might miss a deadline.
No. The fear is that missing a deadline reveals a fundamental flaw in your character.
And you feel every single ounce of this cumulative weight right now just pressing you down into the sheets.
We want to honor that terror. We are not here to dismiss it or wave a hand over it.
We are not saying your problems are imaginary, or that the mortgage isn't a legally binding document.
Or that the social friction from last Tuesday doesn't physically hurt in your chest. It does.
The philosophical texts we are exploring tonight do not begin by telling you that your pain is a mere illusion.
Not at all. Daoism looks directly, unflinchingly, at the heavy, often brutal conditions of human reality. It does not look away from the struggle to survive.
That validation feels like such a crucial starting point.
It is, because if we are going to find a way out from under this crushing modern weight, we have to look towards someone who experienced an immense, almost unimaginable amount of societal and psychological pressure.
Yet somehow managed to cultivate a profound, sustaining joy.
Right. We have to look at the historical reality of Zhuangzi. Because to truly understand the power of the butterfly dream, we must understand the nightmare of the waking world he lived in.
Let's delve into that history for a second, because it puts things in perspective. The era in which Zhuangzi lived and wrote, which was roughly the 4th century BCE, is known as the Warring States period in China.
And the name itself sort of gives away the reality.
Right, it really does. But the historical records paint a picture of chaos that is difficult for us to even fully comprehend.
This was not a time of peaceful meditation in manicured, tranquil gardens.
Far from it.
Yeah.
This was an era defined by extraordinary systemic human suffering. The ancient feudal order of the Zhou dynasty had completely fractured.
7 major states were locked in a perpetual brutal struggle for absolute supremacy.
And the scale of the violence and instability was just unprecedented.
We're talking about the transition from chariot warfare among alerts, which was somewhat contained, to mass infantry conscription.
Hundreds of thousands of ordinary peasants were drafted into armies, slaughtered in campaigns that lasted for years.
Iron weapons were being mass-produced for the very first time, making the violence much more efficient and devastating. Borders were dissolving and being redrawn with blood.
Entire lineages were wiped out in political purges. And the political philosophy of the day, legalism, basically advocated for draconian punishments and absolute state control over the individual.
The psychological toll of that environment must have been staggering.
I mean, if you think the uncertainty of our modern economy is stressful, imagine living in a world where the laws, the rulers, and the literal borders of your country could change overnight.
Usually accompanied by the razing of your city.
Right. The absolute only certainty in Zhuangzi's world was profound existential uncertainty.
The overarching moral order that had governed society for centuries was completely dismantling itself. The solid life, as they knew it then, wasn't just heavy.
It was actively burning down around them.
Exactly. And in a society experiencing that level of catastrophic breakdown, the natural human response is either deep despair or frantic grasping for control.
Which we see in the other philosophical schools of the time, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. The Confucians tried to desperately rebuild the solid life through rigid rituals, strict hierarchies, and moral codes. They believed that if everyone just played their societal role perfectly, the chaos would stop.
And the Mohists advocated for strict utilitarianism and defensive warfare. Everyone was trying to build stronger walls, better armor, tighter rules.
Which is exactly what makes Zhuangzi so incredibly fascinating and so vital for us tonight.
Because his response to a world on fire was entirely different.
He completely rejected the urge to build thicker walls. He famously refused prestigious government positions, actually choosing to live in relative poverty, making straw sandals.
And despite living in this cauldron of societal collapse, death, and political betrayal, the texts reveal a man who possessed a genuine, unperformed, almost radical joy.
It wasn't a forced smile. It wasn't the kind of toxic positivity or naive optimism that ignores reality.
The translations describe his demeanor as having a lightness that seemed to come from somewhere very deep, a joy that rose up effortlessly. It has been described as being like light coming up through water.
Light coming up through water. That phrasing just changes the way you think about resilience.
It really does. Because the joy isn't floating above the water, totally detached and unaffected by the depths. It originates in the depths and illuminates them from within.
It is a natural byproduct of a completely different way of orienting oneself to reality. But the contrast remains absolutely stark.
Right. Here's a man surrounded by the literal collapse of civilization, yet he maintains this fluid, luminous lightness.
And that contrast brings us to the central question we really have to ask on behalf of the listener lying in the dark right now. How does someone surrounded by the collapse of their society, or, to bring it back to the specific architecture of this bedroom, how does someone surrounded by the crushing demands of modern life?
The credit scores, the unread emails, the terrifying gap in the bank account.
How do they achieve any kind of lightness of being? How do you find light coming up through water when you feel like you are actively drowning in the solid life?
To answer that, the texts bring us to a specific moment, a 3 a.m. moment of its own centuries ago, when Zhuangzi recorded a parable that is arguably the most famous passage in all of Chinese philosophy.
It is a dream that, if we truly let it in, has the power to quietly break the waking world open.
Let us step into that dream. The text is spare, but the implications are just vast. Zhuangzi goes to sleep, and he dreams that he is a butterfly.
We have to be very careful with the imagery here, though, because our modern minds tend to dilute the experience.
We want to make it a cartoon.
Exactly. But he wasn't metaphorically a butterfly. He wasn't a human consciousness awkwardly operating a tiny insect body, looking down at his wings and thinking, wow, I am flying.
In the dream, he was utterly, completely, biologically a butterfly.
He had wings, pale gold wings that fluttered and moved among the flowers with absolute perfection.
He experienced the world through compound eyes, feeling the air currents against his antenna.
What the philosophical analysis highlights here is not just the physical transformation, but the psychological emptiness of the butterfly.
Emptiness in the Daoist sense, meaning a total lack of burdensome attachments.
Right. When we analyze what this butterfly represents, it is the absolute total absence of the solid life.
Think about the internal reality of the butterfly in that moment. It possesses effortless confidence.
Why?
Why?
Because it has never once in its entire fleeting existence been told it is doing something wrong.
Right. It has no concept of failure. It has no performance reviews to dread.
No awkward Tuesday conversations to replay in the dark.
It doesn't worry if it is flying as well as the other butterflies.
Precisely. It has no mortgage. It has no obligations to the Zhou dynasty or the rulers of the Chu state.
It has no political opinions to defend, no reputation to manage, no 15-year plan to execute.
It does not even possess an awareness of its own name. The text describes its existence as joyful, following its fancies, completely unaware that it is Zhuangzi.
It is pure, unmediated presence. The butterfly does not fly while worrying about how well it is flying or where it will fly tomorrow. It is, as the translation says, just the flying in the flowers.
The absolute relief of that state.
It's just the pure aerodynamic grace of having nothing to carry.
But then, inevitably, the dream ends.
And the text describes the waking process, which I think is a sensation everyone listening to us right now knows intimately.
It is that heavy, jarring return to the physical human body. You wake up, and suddenly the gravity of your life hits you all at once.
Zhuangzi awakens and finds himself, quote, solid and unmistakable.
He is suddenly back in the heavy architecture of his human identity.
Yeah.
He is back in a world of war, poverty, and political maneuvering.
He is back in the solid life.
But there is a liminal space. He finds himself in that strange border country between sleep and waking.
That delicate, fading space where the air of the dream hasn't fully dissipated yet.
The profound cellular joy of the flight, the impossible lightness of those pale gold wings, it still lingers in his muscles.
Even as the walls of his room and the walls of his identity begin to rigidly reconstruct themselves around him.
He can feel the memory of flight contrasting violently with the reality of gravity.
And it is exactly in this liminal space, lying in the dark, that Zhuangzi executes what philosophers consider a devastating epistemological pivot.
He is lying there, feeling the fading lightness of the butterfly and the returning weight of the man. And a question arrives.
It doesn't arrive as a panic, though.
No, it arrives softly, like a realization. And the question is this: am I a man who just dreamt of being a butterfly? Or am I a butterfly dreaming right now that I am a man?
Let's just pause. Let's let that sentence settle in the quiet of the room for a second. Let it hang in the dark above you. Am I a man who just dreamt of being a butterfly? Or am I a butterfly dreaming right now that I am a man?
It is so deceptively simple, but it is a profoundly destabilizing inquiry.
Because he wasn't just playing a clever word game to impress his students.
Not at all. He's doing something so much deeper and more subversive. He was quietly, methodically dismantling the very architecture of ordinary certainty.
Exactly, because in the dream, the reality of being a butterfly was absolute. There was no doubt. There was no secondary human consciousness whispering, hey, this is just a dream.
The flowers were real, the wind was real, the pale gold wings were real.
And now, lying in bed, the reality of being a man feels absolute.
Right. He is looking at the solid life, the one with the taxes and the wars and the social obligations, and asking, fundamentally, how we can ever truly objectively know which state of existence is the real one.
It is an epistemological earthquake, delivered with the gentleness of a moth landing on a leaf.
If the experience of being the butterfly felt absolutely, undeniably real in the moment, with no awareness of the man, and the experience of being the man feels absolutely, undeniably real now, what objective outside measure do we have to declare one reality primary and the other an illusion?
We rely on our waking consciousness to validate our waking life, but our dreaming consciousness fully validates the dream.
But, lying here in the dark, understanding that these walls aren't stone, is only half the battle.
Because eventually, the sun is going to come up.
And if I am stressed about my mortgage or my career, and someone suggests to me, hey, maybe your waking life is just a dream, the immediate terrifying leap my brain makes is straight toward the void.
Right, you immediately think, so nothing matters. My life is a joke. The pain I feel in my chest right now isn't real.
If we aren't careful, this paradigm shift can feel incredibly cold. It can feel like slipping into a void where human connection and human struggle mean absolutely nothing.
We have to address this because the absolute last thing we want to do tonight is send anyone spiraling into an empty, uncaring, nihilistic universe.
That is a vital distinction, and the philosophical commentaries on Zhuangzi are incredibly explicit about clarifying this exact point. Zhuangzi was absolutely not a nihilist.
He's not saying that nothing matters or that caring about your family, your work, or your life is a foolish mistake.
Nihilism is a cold, dead end. It asserts that the universe is empty of meaning. Daoism asserts the exact opposite.
Zhuangzi found the universe to be completely, overwhelmingly saturated with the Tao. Vibrant, alive, infinitely meaningful, and constantly transforming.
So his critique wasn't that reality is empty and meaningless.
No, his critique was that our rigid human categories, the boxes we try to force reality into, are artificially small and ultimately fragile.
We obsess over the distinctions between real versus not real, me versus not me, success versus failure, human versus butterfly.
In Daoist thought, this constant categorizing is related to the concept of the 10,000 things.
The 10,000 things represent all the differentiated phenomena of the world. Every object, every label, every social status, every deadline.
Our language and our minds carve up the continuous, flowing reality of the Tao into these tiny, discrete, stressful fragments.
And once we carve the world up into the 10,000 things, we become violently attached to our specific slice of it.
We build fortresses around our chosen categories. The texts describe these rigid categories as looking like walls of a room someone built around an ocean.
It's a stunning image. You cannot contain the ocean. But if you build a small windowless room in the middle of it and you refuse to ever look out the door, you might eventually convince yourself that the ocean doesn't exist.
And that the walls of your tiny room are the absolute limit of the universe.
When Zhuangzi asks if he is the butterfly dreaming of the man, he is gently opening the door of that room.
He is letting the ocean breeze in. Which leads us to the core lesson of this entire philosophy, and perhaps the most crucial sentence for anyone lying awake tonight to hear and absorb.
Zhuangzi is not saying nothing matters. He is saying nothing matters quite as much as you've decided it does.
Nothing matters quite as much as you've decided it does.
When you view your solid life as the only possible reality, every minor failure feels like cosmic annihilation.
If your entire universe is defined by your job title, losing that job is the end of the world.
But if your waking life is just one state of being, a dream, a transformation, a temporary gathering of energy, then the stakes are suddenly, mercifully lowered.
The philosophical texts offer an analogy here that I think completely changes the emotional temperature of this idea.
They suggest that realizing the fluidity of reality is the difference between taking off a heavy coat on a warm evening and being told you have no body.
If a philosopher tells you that you have no body, that your existence is a total illusion, that is terrifying. That is annihilation.
But if you are sweating, exhausted, laboring under the weight of a heavy wool coat, and someone gently taps you on the shoulder and suggests that you can just, well, take it off.
That isn't terrifying. That is an immense, profound physical relief.
And that heavy wool coat is the solid life. It is the obsessive, tight-fisted grip we maintain on our identities.
To help you begin to unbutton that coat, Zhuangzi asks us to examine the concept of fluid boundaries.
Think about the mental boundaries that are keeping you awake in this room right now.
If the line between the waking state and the dreaming state is fundamentally fluid, if we cannot definitively, scientifically prove whether the man is dreaming the butterfly or the butterfly is dreaming the manor, then what other lines are fluid?
What about the absolute, terrifying, rigid line you have drawn in your mind between success and failure?
Or the line between who you are and who you could never be. That's the one that really keeps us up, isn't it? The identity trap.
I am a responsible, competent person, therefore I cannot make this mistake.
I am a successful person, therefore I cannot have this specific gap in my bank account.
We build these rigid identities out of the 10,000 things, and when the messy, chaotic reality of the world doesn't perfectly match our constructed identities, the friction generates panic.
Yes. We treat the walls of our identity, our job titles, our social status, our reputation among our peers, as if they are made of solid, impenetrable stone.
We treat them as permanent fortresses that we must defend at all costs, day and night.
But the Daoist perspective suggests they are not stone at all. They are phenomena in constant transition.
They are like weather. Or like clouds reflected in the surface of a river.
Clouds reflected in a river. It really changes how you look at the 15-year plan you made or the panic over Tuesday's conversation.
They're visible, they're part of the landscape, you can acknowledge them.
But you don't try to build a house on a reflection. You don't try to desperately grip a cloud to keep from drowning.
Exactly. And that brings us to the core psychological practice of Daoism, loosening your grip on the 10,000 things.
The goal is not to pretend the world doesn't exist. You still have to eat. You still have to navigate society.
But you change how you hold these things. When we grip our identities, our anxieties, and our plans too tightly, they crush us.
The instruction is to loosen the grip. The mortgage, the emails, the expectations, they are real enough to bump into, real enough to navigate, but they are not cosmically permanent.
They are not your essential nature.
But lying here in the dark, understanding that these walls aren't stone is only half the battle. Because eventually the sun is going to come up, the alarm is going to go off.
And the cloud reflected in the river is going to demand a status report on that project.
Exactly. So how do we actually move through our waking life, our jobs, our deeply frustrating commutes, our social obligations, without being crushed by those walls the moment our feet hit the floor?
To answer how we survive the morning, the text introduced the Daoist concept of xiaoyaoyu, often translated as free and easy wandering.
Now, wandering in this philosophical context does not mean being lost or aimless or shirking your responsibilities.
It is a highly specific, elevated mode of being. It means moving through the solid waking world the exact same way the butterfly moves through the dream.
It means moving with a direction that comes from somewhere much deeper than your conscious, anxious, calculating mind.
In wandering, the final destination becomes entirely secondary to the fluid quality of the movement itself.
It's the concept of wu-wei, right? Action without forcing.
Yes, the text gives some incredibly grounded examples of this from Zhuangzi's other writings. It's the fish swimming perfectly through the currents without ever having to consciously study hydrodynamics or remind itself that it is a fish.
It's the bird riding the thermals without sitting on a branch, drawing up a spreadsheet to calculate the exact aerodynamics of its wings before taking off.
And it's the sage, the ideal Daoist figure, moving through the chaotic, dangerous society of the warring states, period, like water.
Water doesn't fight the rock in the middle of the stream. It yields to it, flows around it, and eventually, over time, smooths it down without ever once losing its fundamental fluid nature.
To truly understand the power of wandering, we have to look closely at its opposite, which the texts describe as armoring.
This is where we return to you, listening to us right now, feeling the weight of the night.
We know about the heavy armor you are wearing. We all wear it.
From the outside, looking at you in the daylight, your armor probably looks fantastic.
It looks like extreme competence. It looks like reliability.
It looks like being the person who has everything under control, the person everyone else can rely on.
But let's be intimate and brutally honest about what that armor is actually made of on the inside, where it presses against your skin.
It isn't made of steel or genuine confidence. It is made of terror.
It is forged out of thoughts like, I should be further along in my career by now, or what will they think of me if I drop this ball?
It is held together by the deep, silent, pervasive fear that underneath all this exhausting performance of competence, we are somehow insufficient, or unlovable, or just faking it.
The armor is a rigid defense mechanism against a world we believe is constantly, mercilessly judging our solid life credentials.
The armor is exhausting because it requires constant energy to maintain. Wandering is the deliberate practice of stepping out of the armor. But how do we do that practically?
Here is where I have to play devil's advocate for the listener again, because I can hear the objection forming in the dark.
The listener is thinking, this is lovely poetry, the fish, the water, the butterfly, but I can't just float into my Monday morning status meeting acting like a literal insect.
I can't look my boss in the eye and say I'm wandering free and easy like water when the quarterly numbers are down.
The world requires performance, the mortgage requires a paycheck, society demands legibility.
That is a completely fair, fiercely pragmatic objection, and the Daoist texts anticipate it perfectly. Remember, Zhuangzi was not a naive romantic.
He lived in the brutal warring states period.
Yeah.
He knew exactly how dangerous hierarchies and societal demands could be.
He didn't tell people to just ignore the warlords. The instruction here is not to permanently, recklessly shed your professional self.
You do not have to quit your job tomorrow morning, abandon your family, or walk off into the woods to become a hermit.
So what is the actual invitation then, if not a total rejection of the waking world?
The invitation tonight is infinitely more subtle and infinitely more profound. It is just to hold your identity a little more lightly.
It is to recognize deep in your bones that your professional self, your anxious self, the persona you have carefully constructed for the solid life, is just one vivid, meaningful dream among many possible dreams.
You still attend the Monday morning meeting. You still pay the mortgage.
But you attend the meeting knowing internally that the meeting is weather, not stone.
You perform the role society requires of you, but you no longer mistake the role for your entire soul. You are a cosmic actor, playing the part of the employee without forgetting that you are the actor.
I want to focus on how we practice holding that identity lightly in the middle of the chaos. Because we have to find small, practical moments to actually visit that butterfly within our daily waking lives.
We need a reliable bridge between the quiet realizations we have at 3 a.m. and the frantic, buzzing stress of 3 p.m.
The translations and commentaries point out something very comforting, something you don't need to learn, but only remember. You already know how to do this.
You have already met the butterfly within you. Think back to your childhood. Do you remember getting entirely, comprehensively lost in play for 3 straight hours?
You were building something in the dirt, or exploring the woods behind your house, or painting with colors, and you completely, utterly lost the concept of time.
There was no past to regret, no future to fear, no self-consciousness monitoring your performance. There was just the pure, unmediated activity.
Yes, the absolute absorption of play. But even as an adult heavily burdened by the solid life, we still experience those rare, brief flashes of pure presence.
Think about the feeling of stepping outside after a storm and smelling rain on hot pavement.
Or looking out the window of a train and seeing sunlight moving on the surface of water.
For just a fraction of a second, before the mind jumps back to the to-do list, you feel deeply, inexplicably fine.
The heavy wool coat lifts off your shoulders, just for a moment. In that split second, you aren't your job title.
You aren't your bank account. You aren't your failures. You are just a conscious being experiencing the geometry of sunlight.
That is the butterfly. That is exactly what Zhuangzi is pointing to.
So the daily practice derived from these ancient texts is this. When the solid life gets too heavy, when the perpetual exhausting need to optimize your personal brand, or manage everyone's perception of you, or fix every problem immediately becomes too much to bear, you must pause.
You must stop trying to solve the puzzle of the solid life with the exact same anxious mind that created the puzzle.
Instead, you ask the butterfly's question.
And the question is not, how do I fix this deadline? The question is not, how do I make that person respect me more?
The practice is to literally, quietly ask yourself in the middle of the storm, am I the man dreaming of the butterfly or the butterfly dreaming of the man?
What is crucial to understand about this practice is that the question is not a logical riddle meant to be solved. You are not trying to arrive at a definitive scientific answer.
Exactly. It isn't a puzzle, it is a door.
When you ask that question in the middle of a stressful Tuesday afternoon, it causes a slight, almost imperceptible softening of the rigid walls around you.
It introduces just enough philosophical doubt about the absolute, terrifying reality of your stress to let a little bit of fresh air into the room. It reminds you that your job title is not your species.
Your job title is not your species. That perfectly encapsulates the relief Zhuangzi offers. You are the vast, infinite dreamer of the life you are living, not just a tiny, trapped character suffering inside the dream.
Asking the question doesn't magically pay the mortgage, but it restores your perspective.
It shrinks the immediate, overwhelming crisis back down to its proper manageable size within the vastness of the Tao.
As we come to the end of our time together, as the room around you settles even deeper into the quiet of the night, and the hum of the refrigerator fades into the background, I want to whisper a final, gentle instruction.
It is perhaps the most important thing we've discussed all night.
Do not try to solve your mortgage right now. Do not try to resolve the nuances of Tuesday's awkward conversation. Leave it unresolved.
When Zhuangzi woke up from his dream, he didn't frantically rush to the nearest university to prove scientifically whether he was a man or an insect.
He didn't demand an immediate, concrete answer from the universe. He just let the question live inside him.
He let the mystery land lightly, like a butterfly resting on a leaf.
And as you let that profound question land lightly within your own mind, I want to offer you a deep reassurance drawn straight from the heart of Daoist thought.
Tomorrow morning, the sun will inevitably come up. The alarm will sound.
You will get out of bed and you will pick up the heavy, solid life once again.
You will put the armor back on, you will commute, you will go to work, you will answer the emails and navigate the friction.
And that is completely, entirely fine.
The Tao does not judge the man for not being the butterfly. The universe is not disappointed in you for having to survive.
The Tao holds both the heavy, waking reality of the burdened man and the light, soaring reality of the butterfly with exactly equal tenderness.
So for right now, in this specific, fleeting moment in the dark, you have permission to set the weight down.
You do not have to carry tomorrow until tomorrow arrives.
Just feel the physical weight of your body pressing against the mattress. Feel the texture of the blankets. Feel the rhythm of your own breathing.
But try not to feel that weight as something trapped by gravity or pinned down by the exhaustion of anxiety.
Feel it as something finally resting.
You exist right now in that airy, impossible, beautiful gap between the heavy, solid life and the light wings of the dream.
You are safe in that gap.
Yeah.
No one is asking anything of you here.
Before we leave you to the quiet, I want to leave you with one final, gentle thought to carry with you as you drift off.
A thought to quietly mull over when the mind tries, out of habit, to pull you back to the dark arithmetic of the clock.
What is that thought?
Consider this. What if the sleep you are about to fall into is not merely a biological interruption of your real waking life?
What if it isn't just a blank, dark space you have to endure so you can repair your body and get back to the hard, exhausting work of being you?
What if, instead, sleep is the exact moment you finally return to who you truly are?
Think about that as you close your eyes. What if your waking anxieties, the job, the mortgage, the endless performance of the solid life? What if all of that is just the heavy, restrictive cocoon?
And the deep, dark silence of this room right now is the limitless sky you were always meant to fly in.
The waking world is the cocoon. The dream is the flight.
We wish you well, Night Wanderer.
You don't have to carry the solid life anymore tonight. Take off the heavy coat. The dream is safe. Good night.